Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Fitch. I am Senior Investigative Reporter for Connecticut Inside Investigator. And this is our twice a month podcast called Inside Update. And I am filling in for our managing editor, Connor Dragotis, who is on a much needed vacation. And just a couple precautionary notes. He is both better looking and better at this than me. So sorry to all of you out there watching this on your screens, but I'm going to do my best. And this week, I am joined by our investigative reporter, Brandon Whiting, to discuss his latest investigation, which we've had some really great response to. I mean, great in some ways. But this involves a methadone clinic in New Haven that perhaps could be doing a little better. It could be, I think one of the best phrases in the piece is they could be better neighbors to the people living in that neighborhood. And the response that we've gotten from people living in that neighborhood was that this investigation was spot on. They're not happy about how this foundation is being run or the crime elements that are being brought in to their neighborhood with this particular methadone clinic. It's called the APT Foundation. It's located on Congress Avenue in New Haven. And Brandon, why don't you get us started and just tell us, how you came across this story? Because you had just done, not, just a month ago, you had done a story about Connecticut's needle exchange and just the huge uptick in just needles being left around, in playgrounds and everything else. So how did you come across this story with the APT Foundation?
Well, from the same source as our needle story, as you might imagine, John Lockhart, he has been just a very adamant crusader of trying to clean up the neighborhood, both physically, literally with the needles, and also kind of, more metaphorically speaking, just in regards to elements of the community that he thinks are kind of damaging to it. It's kind of no secret that the Hill, it's as Leslie Radcliffe put it, who's chair of city planning now, but she kind of serves sort of like in an advisory role, wise community leader role for the Hill North community management team. She herself, she had acknowledged like this neighborhood, it's had problems before APT, it'll have problems after APT. But the real question is how much is APT kind of contributing just to the environment of negativity there? Because I mean, from a, not to put it coldly, but from a business standpoint, if you're a drug dealer, it makes sense that you're going to want to set up shop right down the street from a bunch of, known drug addicts, people struggling with drug issues who are going to get their treatment, most of them, and some of them who perhaps are there for the wrong reasons entirely. And that sort of element is what John was really locked in on. He had heard just from, I've told him he could be, an investigator himself, just the way that he's built sources in this community. But from trusted sources in the community, he was made aware of the issue of people who are patients at the clinic who get their methadone and, you get take-home doses because obviously clinic isn't open 24/7, right? So they have Sundays off. And people still need their methadone, even if the clinic isn't going to be open that day. So everybody, no matter what standing they're in with the clinic, good or bad, they can get their takeaway dose of methadone to take home and to use there. And it had been made clear to him that there's a significant population there who are they're not taking it home with them. They're selling it to other people, using that money,
Let's
to buy more drugs. So
let's talk about that for a minute, because I used to walk past a methadone clinic on Main Street in Hartford every day, and I still do. I still walk past it quite a bit, and it seems fine.
Mm-hmm.
definitely, I am not seeing there what is being described in your article. And not only that, you interviewed the people doing this. You interviewed people who got their methadone, walked right out the door, sold it to somebody standing right outside this foundation, and then used the money for, God knows what. I mean, like you said, I think there's at one point there's a drug dealer right around the corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I certainly there's something different going on here. And it also sounds like, one of the concerns is that APT is essentially importing people from other places. They're all coming here, and people who might have been kicked out of previous programs are coming here because of their lax standards in administering methadone. When people show up with heroin in their system or fentanyl in their system, and they just keep letting it slide, and giving out the methadone.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, all right, one of the big questions I had is, why is anybody selling methadone? Who wants it? Right? I mean,
That's what got me.
do you want the heroin or you want the methadone? I don't understand. So what's the point of selling the methadone?
That's what got me very interested in the story too, is just that was my initial question. I was like, people are doing this? Like, I don't see the purpose, because if you are an addict, methadone, it's not very pleasurable typically. That's kind of its whole mechanism of action is, hey, it's an opioid, but from the patients that we spoke to, it's very clinical in nature. You're not getting a buzz, you're not getting euphoria off of it. They said initially when you're put on it, and you don't have any experience with it, you can feel a little bit of a high, but they say pretty quickly, like, you spend a week on it, you're not feeling anything, pleasurable.
It's basically to control the withdrawal symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an opioid, but it's not inebriating in the same way that other opioids are, or fatal in the same way that other opioids are, which I want to be very clear. If me or you took it with no opioid tolerance, it very well could be fatal to us. But for people who are opioid users, who have built up a high tolerance, they're going to be able to take it. They're not going to be nodding out or they're able to live their lives essentially, while being able to not go through the withdrawal symptoms typically associated. And because it has sort of an extended release quality to it, and I don't know if that's just the drug itself and the way that it's metabolized, or if there's something they do with it, pharmaceutically, but that's how it acts in the patients when they're administered it. Typically you get your dose, and that's supposed to hold you over for the day. Speaking with Aaron, who is a former clinician there, he said, that more or less works. Some people it doesn't work as well with. So from what there was a bunch of reasons given, essentially. Some people, they go there and they sell it to dealers, or just people who don't want to go to the clinic, or who perhaps couldn't get it approved on their insurance, which I was told is another issue. For some people, it's cheaper just to buy it from somebody who's at the clinic than it is if they were to go there and pay for it out of pocket. So that's certainly an issue. Other people just are buying it to, apparently there is a market element to it, where it's not just, hey, I'm helping out a friend in need. And that's what I was really interested to know. Aaron had told me that he had watched, he kind of took it upon himself one morning. He went down there and he saw a woman buying the methadone and then approaching dealers a few blocks away saying, hey, I have this methadone, do you want to buy it? And selling it to them. So there is sort of this more market element where it's not just users or recovering users selling to other recovering users, which I found to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think in the piece you also mentioned that, it's sometimes they'll use the methadone to balance out their addiction to opioids while simultaneously consuming other drugs as well.
Yeah, that was Leslie's kind of theory. Full disclosure, she's not a doctor, she's just a community member. But I do think that was Aaron, who was a doctor, who did work there. Well, I don't know if doctor is the correct terminology. He worked there in a clinical capacity. He did say that they saw often, a lot of the times, patients who, they didn't even have polydrug addiction or problems outside of opioids before moving to the methadone clinic, but they just have such deep rooted mental health issues that once they're on the methadone and it's essentially, they're not getting really high off of it, they're searching for a high. So they are going to use the methadone, but then they're also going to seek out highs from other drugs, such as, cocaine, for example. So yeah, that certainly happens. There's also instances of people who, the allotted doses that they receive, it just isn't really enough to hold off their cravings for a full day. So they kind of supplement it with more methadone that they would purchase on the street. So there is several reasons. The economy of it, that's one thing that if I were able to dig in deeper, I guess I would have liked to see. I'd be interested in the types of people who are simply buying it for, presumably resale purposes, like what Aaron had noted that he saw with the woman who bought it and then resold it to other dealers. It just seems like a weird kind of market to be eking out in the drug sphere. But yeah, so those are the reasons given to me. Perhaps there's more, but those are the big ones.
This has been, this particular APT Foundation location has been in the news recently because the city of New Haven was looking to relocate it to, I believe, Long Wharf.
Yeah,
Long Wharf Drive. And the neighbors there said no, and I believe that plan is on hold, so it's just remaining at Congress Avenue. And I know, leading up to the publication of this story, you were like, I think it was like a day or two before it was going to be published, and you messaged me being like, oh no, like things are happening, and I have to rework some of the articles. So why don't you tell me what was happening in those last few minutes, last few days before the article went live that, had you scrambling?
Yeah, it was a constantly developing situation, or continually developing, I believe is the industry term. Yeah, I thought I had this thing in the bag, and there is just, the most recent plan essentially that the city had is they were working with APT to move. They were going to close the Congress Ave clinic. My understanding is they would have kept the building open, but it only would have been used like in an official or administrative capacity. So sort of as like an office space for APT employees. And they were going to move all of the clinical activity, the dispensing of the methadone itself, down to a location on Long Wharf. And that they've been working on that plan, I want to say, for the better part of like 2 years. And it all just kind of fell apart over the course of about a week. They had brought it before the city planning commission because they needed various permits. They needed, I believe, a special use permit, I want to say. They needed permits for the excess parking. And then they just needed a site plan approval. And the planning commission said, we're not going to give you any of those. And beyond that, it was going to be taken before the Board of Alders because they would be the ones who vote on whether, because the parcel that it's on, it was a former community college, so it belongs to the state. So the state would have had to convey the land. And the Board of Alders were the ones who were in charge of voting whether or not that land would get conveyed to APT. And that was on the agenda for, what's the date now? This came out last Sunday. So that was last Wednesday was when that was supposed to happen. The afternoon prior to that, Elliker, he had held a conference saying, we're going to put this on hold for now. We're removing that from the agenda because the community has made their voices loud and clear that they really do not approve of this move. And that's where it's difficult. It's like, yes, I do think that I think most people would say, actually, perhaps that depends upon who you ask, because if you talk to Leslie or you talk to John or you talk to Miguel, they're kind of fed up with the idea of what these clinics do in their clinical capacity as well. But it's like, even if you do approve of methadone, how do you balance, you know what I mean, where the service that you're providing with the impact that it's having on your community? And what you were speaking earlier about, you walk past a clinic in Hartford and it's nothing like this. I think a large difference in that is just the way that they administer the program over at APT, where it's kind of just very forgiving, come one, come all, will accept you. And it kind of really is just the space to where, if you are on your quote unquote last strike, if you've already struck it out of these other programs, if you've already been kicked out and you have nowhere else to go, that's where you're going. And so it does kind of act as sort of this just last safety net for a lot of people in the state who, for better or worse, have gotten kicked out of other programs due to their behavior or their inability to remain clean, or their activity selling the drug, selling the methadone. So it's just an interesting situation altogether, frankly.
Yeah, and like one of the main people who you interview is Aaron, the former clinician at this particular location,
Mhm.
and he described working there as not so great. He
Yeah.
described burnout. He described patients who will come in who are violent or abusive, and they just keep admitting them. And so it didn't sound like it was it didn't sound as strict as some of the other programs. Could you elaborate a little bit on that as to like what are they letting slide there that separates them from other clinics?
I think one of the big thing really is just the drug testing, essentially. My understanding from everyone that I spoke with is just that at other clinics they're much more strict about, hey, if you are repeatedly testing positive for other substances while you're coming in here, we're going to be much stricter. We're going to crack down on your methadone. And not only just the takeaway methadone doses, because they have it there where, and at most clinics, where if you're a trusted patient, you know what I mean, you've been able to stay clean, you've had good conversations with your counselors, they build up that relationship with you, you can get takeaway doses, and you can get them in excess of just like the days where it's closed, you know what I mean.
Mhm.
You can get up to, I believe, a month's worth is the most that you can be provided with, but there could have been more. But yeah, typically if you're at that position and you get these takeaway doses and then you test positive, they're going to snag your bottles away. But Aaron was saying that they're very forgiving about that. And so they'll even allow people who have tested positive to test positive again and again before they actually take away their take home doses. So that's a big one. They said it's very difficult to get kicked off the program in general. Even the patients I spoke to themselves kind of corroborated that and said, like, we've seen it happen before, but you have to do something really, really bad, or you just have to be really, really obvious and dumb about selling your methadone. Essentially, you have to get caught selling your methadone. Like, that's typically a one strike you're out situation. But it's also, it just kind of raises the question of, okay, well, how good of a job are we at actually catching people selling their methadone, because it's happening in plain sight. Like, yeah, I didn't
Well,
have
there used to be a police officer there, right? I mean, years ago,
that's
you said, yeah.
that was the other interesting element too. I had reached out to the city. I was hoping to speak to somebody on the police force, because I don't think, the one thing I would say in APT's defense is, look, they're not the only one who's playing a part in this, right? Like, the city has some sort of obligation to the community, you know what I mean, to kind of clean things up. Like, I don't think it is unreasonable to suspect that, like, the cops, APT's not in charge of the entire neighborhood, right?
Right.
So that was what interested me. I reached out to the city of New Haven. I got, oh, this is great, we'll see who we can connect you with. I sent them over all my questions. I said, this is really thorough list of questions, yada, yada. I'll let you know if there's anyone who you should be interviewing. I can set up some times. We will get back to you, blah, blah, blah. I gotten absolutely nothing back. They they responded as if I were to get something back, and then they didn't give me anything back. But yes, there is a police presence in the neighborhood, which I was surprised when I walked down there with John. I was like, wait a minute, there's a cop like right up the block. Like, how is any of this occurring? But it just goes down to lax enforcement kind of on all sides, whether that's from the police or that is from the foundation itself. And that's what I was asking Leslie, is I was like, do you think this is fair to all throw on APT, or do you think the city plays an element in it? And she had told me, which I think was probably the most interesting little tidbit, like tucked into the article towards the end there, is that the day after the planning commission kind of shot down all of their permits, she was driving through the community and she said it looked like a ghost town, like the whole area was clean. She was like, Public Works must have came in and cleaned up all the trash. There was no people just hanging about on the streets. There was no open drug use. Like, it was quiet and calm and normal in a way that was just totally uncharacteristic of the community. And she had thought to herself, like, okay, this is probably, she's like, I don't know if this was APT or if this was the city or the both of them, but this looks to me like a conscious effort to clean up the community and hopefully, like, a last ditch chance of winning public approval. And what struck her was just like, well, you guys could have been doing this whole time, is what this means. And so that's, it's just, it's an interesting dichotomy of how much, how much blame do you assert to each party? And at the end of the day, I think there's enough to go around, but there's also just, why do you have to wait until the fourth quarter, essentially?
Why do you have to wait until an investigative journalist comes down there and makes a 5,000 word story out of your incompetence? Yeah. So I think that's a good spot for us to leave off on. I think one of the big takeaways from this story is that, if the government and, nonprofits want to, put these kind of places in neighborhoods, there is an obligation to be a good neighbor to the people in that community. It doesn't seem like that's happening at this particular location, New Haven. And, maybe they'll start trying to clean it up with some bad press. We can hope. So for everybody out there, please go to Inside Investigator and check out Brandon's latest, and look back at his previous story too about the needle exchange, because they all kind of work together. They're all taking place in the same neighborhood. And it's important because this is some real quality of life. This is some life and death stuff. And Brandon's done a great job of going out there, picking up the needles himself, and, interviewing the people who live there. So excellent work.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that about does it for Inside update for this week. I'm going to attempt to leave off with Connor's, his final salutation or whatever. Be well, stay safe, and stay informed. And until next time, from Inside Investigator, so long.